Thank you for your words. They were very moving. I am part of the delegation of the Americas. I wanted to ask the magistrate about the accusations on the the involvement of multinational corporations in the electoral context.
Bueno, primero muchas gracias por la presentación y por su intervención.
First of all, thank you for the presentation and thank you for sharing your sentiments with us. I am also a part of the delegation of the Americas, and we were all talking yesterday, and we wanted to discuss the theme about some candidates to presidency who have decided to leave the process, and we're not sure about their votes. So I wanted to know what that's happening with that. We know that the decision could happen, could change, and it depends on if we have a victory over the first round. It seems like there's a small margin of votes that could be the difference between a first round or a second round. And how you have also told us that there's a majority in the council that is not favorable to democracy. How does this affect the electoral process? Thank you. My name is Ivan Gonzalez. I'm from the Confederation of Syndicate of America, and we are with you and with the people of Colombia. About tomorrow, the tables, the voting process ends at 4. Independently of who's in line, is there a period of time to initiate the first vote? And there's a time for the confirmation of the results. The practice recently has been very quick, but we understand that tomorrow this might be a different situation. And that gives us margin of, gives room for bad actors to create a climate that the elections might be the results we may want. They may take advantage of that. What is the maximum time for the results to actually be confirmed? And if that could be extended all the way until Monday, or is there a limit for this to happen the day of tomorrow? See? If we allow him, he must be allowed to respond to the questions, because then he'll forget. Well, this has been made public months ago. The accusations, actually filmed, and also written testimonies through WhatsApp, where business leaders and contractors are committing crimes. A legal crime that actually gives a penalty of prison time of 4 to 5 years, and they've been saying, and they've said it publicly in radio interviews, that if Gustavo Petro wins the presidential election, that the businesses will just close and the employees will have no work. Or even worse, that if they know if any of their employers vote for Gustavo Petro, they will be fired from that company. I've been talking about this in the National Commission of Guaranteed Electoral, and I've been demanding an action by the judicial system, so they could investigate and take to court these business owners. So I've been participating in the last National Commission, where I wasn't invited also. I have to call the MOE, so they tell me when they're having these meetings. So I get there, and the Ministry of Defense, when he's asked about this, he's like, "Oh no, they're acting, they're investigating against the National Registry that is, doing this in these state departments and these states. The judiciary, the fiscal properties are acting on this, and they're saying no, that this is, they're actually acting against this clan that's doing this." The clan of Gulf wants to kill Gustavo Petro. So I tell the Ministry of Defense, and why don't you talk about the public the declarations that are happening every single day in this country? The one from the business people that are forcing and are telling their employees that they can't vote for Gustavo Petro, that they have to vote for Federico Gutierrez. Why doesn't the government ask for investigations, these penal investigations? Well, now there's another question here that's also very delicate. I asked for I want to say something that the MOE declared to us, and who the representative of Pacto Histórico solicited in that space, Gustavo Garcia. In the Ministry of Interior, we want him to decide that the votes that come out for two candidates that are no longer in running for the presidency will be declared nulls or just non-marked votes, because that could be an incident that could eventually lead to a first round, or the difference between a first round or a second round. And so we have the rules very clear. I've been asking my colleagues that we have a plenary decision. So we had the meeting yesterday at 2, and I explained to them the debate on this issue. I explained to them that we need to make a decision immediately for national security, for electoral security, for transparency, for clarity of the political forces, of what would happen with those votes of the candidates that are no longer running. I'm not related to candidate Perez, by the way. From the candidate Spies Perez or the ex-candidate Ingrid Betancourt. So in relation to what's happening with the votes. So I even had the naivety to say, this doesn't even take 10 minutes. Let's just make that decision really quickly. Well, of course, it was my surprise when they all were like, no, we don't have any reason to make a decision, that we'll do it later. And I said, but how are you guys thinking that after the elections, when there's so many interests at play, that we just make a decision after the fact? But no, they overruled me. In fact, the president of the National Electoral Council said without any opposition, they were not going to make a decision over this. So, like, I don't count in this decision, basically, like a magistrate in the National Electoral Council. And really, I was angry. When did you change this rule of the National Electoral Council? When do you say that you make a unanimous decision? Finally, they made the decision that we wouldn't make a decision. And I just, had to leave my dissent, historic dissent. And unfortunately, within 5 minutes, there was a requirement that came after so that we would make a decision for the same reasons that I had just stated, for transparency, for guarantee for the political electoral forces that we needed to decide. It could be that nothing happens. I hope. It could be that we don't have to make this decision that has grave consequences for the entire country. It could be that happens. It could be that the votes put by these candidates are insignificant in the greater outcome. But in such a complex circumstance like the one we're in now, where it's announced that the margins of errors and the polls talk about a possible victory the day of tomorrow without a second round, well, it's inconceivable that we haven't taken a decision on this matter. So Ivan asked about the pre-count. We have demanded a double digitalization. I have demanded in particular that they sent that for those who have transmitted the data, for the telephonic transmissions, to avoid or prevent fraud, that the data is transmitted incorrectly. So I want the transmissions to be recorded. But of course, the National Registry said that that's not possible. That's not in the contract. It's not in the budget. They won't permit it. But that they're going to do recordings in their own right. It's better than nothing, but so it is possible that that pre-count might take longer than what is normally happens. And it's that at 5 p.m. or 5:30 p.m. we know who the winner is, who at least had the most number of votes. Normally it's like that. And what worries me is that normally the people of Colombia have that habit of knowing. Now the time might be doubled to get those results, and I think that the people are not ready for that pre-count to take that long. Let's hope that it doesn't take that long. Let's hope that the results are given promptly. But sometimes, let's hope that it coincides with the results of the scrutiny process. Let's hope that they do coincide. But I've told them that this is a democratic party. I've invited the public of Colombia to trust in their systems, to trust that Colombia is going to give them the most transparent election in history. And I can't permit that and say that we're going to have the most electorate in most just elections in Colombia, and it will be the ones that will be most scrutinous. And I hope sincerely that it is a Democratic Party, and I hope that the people go out and vote. We have 39 million electors here, 39 million voters. And the turnout is superior to 50%, but I want people to understand all the difficulties of this process. I think I've been talking too much, but counting you guys, telling all of you the difficulties of this process. But as I've also said publicly in all media, here the registry has been called to make a series of decisions to implement recommendations from the European Union, from the OAS, from the MOE, from the magistrate of the Tribunal of Denmark, that they take caution, that they've been asked to suspend the register, but the magistrate, instead of suspending the registry, established a series of requirements to guarantee the transparency of this electoral process. More recommendations that we've made to the National Electoral Council. So all of that is really supposedly guarantee the most transparent elections in Colombia. And like I commented yesterday, as some of you may have heard, for example, you guys will see that now every single Colombian will have to put their fingerprint in their signature to leave a tracking. How much difficulty it costed me to actually make that happen. I mean, I received so many complaints of fraud because, I kept getting accusations that dead people were voting. And it was a huge problem in homogeneous tables where the jurors were bought, where they introduced at the voting box the votes they wanted to vote. We found a spot where 200 people have voted when there were 200 votes when there was only 80 people. It was so difficult. It's something that I still can't understand to this very moment. All of the opposition that my colleagues presented against me just for wanting that resolution. Finally, we adopted the resolution. The resolution of 2019, it was finally approved. And many of them are saying that the fingerprint doesn't do anything, that it just takes too long, it elongates the process. So, and that I was responsible if citizens weren't able to vote and if their vote was suppressed because the long lines, that the fingerprints, they could copy them. And I still remember the disagreements I had with my colleagues, telling them that there was the assassination of an important businessman, him and his son, not that long ago, over corrupt accusations. And him and his kid were killed, poisoned by cyanide, because they had drank out of this particular bottle of water. So who put cyanide in that bottle? The father and the son. But the diligence was extreme. Where did they detect the fingerprints to say there wasn't a crime? Well, the jurors went through this whole investigative process, and they figured out that the fingerprints were their own, so they had committed suicide. So I told them, if they have such a capacity to go and do all these investigations, to go look at digital fingerprints in a little bottle of water, how are you going to tell me that the fingerprints for a citizen voting isn't a valid thing to be made in a document? Well, ultimately, on the 15th of January of this year, the registry consulted as a consequence that we're still during a pandemic, I say that we, in effect for this election, that we include the fingerprints. They wanted them they actually wanted to take that out, the fingerprints, because of the pandemic, which to me seemed like the most ridiculous thing at the registry. In the middle of a pandemic, since the beginning of the pandemic, in the Dominican Republic, in Central America, in Mexico, in Ecuador, in Peru, in Chile, in Bolivia, in the middle of the pandemic. And they had registered in many of these countries with fingerprints and with a signature. And of course, when everything had ended and the COVID crisis was almost done, how would you use that excuse to stop an act of transparency, which is what they were trying to do? And the registry wanted to exclude the fingerprint and the signature and pushed back and said, okay, well, for reasons of transparency, they finally voted to keep that. And my colleagues, what did my colleagues decide? Do any of you anticipate what my colleagues wanted to do in reference to the signature in the fingerprint? They wanted to suspend it. They wanted to suspend the resolution because of the pandemic. Well, what did I do? I contacted the most influential journalist of this country, Mr. Daniel Coronel, who millions of people listen to. And I said, Daniel, please, can you help me resolve this issue? They don't want transparency in this country. Now they make an entire ginormous frauds in every election, substituting the different types of votes. Please, here are all the documentations of the presidents, the many times the fraud has happened. So I gave it to them. And I asked another friend of mine, and I gave him this. And in the middle of the editorial of Daniel, which is called Reporte Coronel, where Daniel was publicly making this declaration, the register calls me. You can tell the country that yes, we will include the fingerprint and the signature in the form of voting. And of course, in social media, I proclaim that yes, they have called me and said that yes, they will finally accept the registry of fingerprints and signature. Those are the weaknesses of the state, of our democracy. But well, we were able to do it. Any other questions? Does anybody have a question? I would ask to ask something technical. How many people are registered? And if the people who weren't able to register in March, the 800 million, how have they registered for this election? I don't have the data. How many people are registered right now? But I do know that the electric signature, the electric registration did not work. I don't have the data right now, but I will ask. We have about 39 million people that are able to vote and are registered to vote this round. I have a question about the registry. If it's a paper type of voting, and also the talk of the machines. Is it obligatory for the kids, the schools to vote? And do they put the ink on the voters once they vote? Because that's not clear to me. Or the protocol of this process. There's 20,000 tables with biometric identification. And that biometric system should be mandatory, but the register told me it's not, and therefore, when I consulted with Amoy, there are many citizens that aren't registered in the biometric system at the moment of voting. So it was one of my complaints, because it's just not going to be able to be used to actually trace back the vote. The problem isn't the electoral organization. The National Electoral Council needs to go. The registry needs to lose the way that it's not, change the way it's organizing elections. It's not fair. It can't be that just one person claims full control. And even though the origin of the registry is institutionally not political, it's supposed to be the courts that elect, the National Court, the Supreme Court, and the State Court. It's not possible that one person is dealing with the entire responsibility. So what I've been asking is that they transmit a reform to bring a tribunal, like a parliament that has an administrative body that administers the elections, and a judicial overlook that looks at all the controversies and declarations in the electoral process, and that none of them, no political party, could take control in naming the magistrates of the tribunal. And I hope that the next Congress adopts a reform of that nature. Good morning. Thank you for the questions that you're answering. I am from the Spanish delegation, and I wanted to ask a worry that I have that I got yesterday. Yesterday we assisted members of the CNE, and we talked about how the media was playing this role in this campaign, and I've detected a disproportionate, a failure of the law that demands that the media be impartial. So they were talking to us about the uniform that they had at the hand, that the descriptions they had came from the media that was given. It was mainly television. They were giving 80,000 seconds for Federico Gutierrez, 50,000 for Rodolfo Hernandez, and 47 for Fajardo. And it was very disproportionate, but also, of course they're just quantitative numbers, but also they could be talking negatively or positively. But in any case, I wanted to send a recommendation that the CNE doesn't have any capacity to tell the media to be more less impartial. My question is, what can we do in terms of some media companies, media outlets, that are giving a report that is very biased?
Buenos días, Javier. No, efectivamente, ese desequilibrio ya lo habíamos constatado incluso antes de las elecciones legislativas, donde uno puede sacar conclusiones. Por ejemplo, en ese momento, al que de lejos le habían entregado la mayor publicidad en todas las televisiones nacionales y regionales, fue un candidato que el establecimiento quería posicionar, Enrique Peñalosa. De lejos, pero de lejos era 4 o 5 veces más que cualquier otro. Y sin embargo fracasaron en esa estrategia, pese a todo lo que hicieron para visibilizar. El señor Peñalosa no contó en este proceso electoral. Y esa es una dificultad. Eso me lleva a una conclusión que tiene que ver también con las fuentes ilegales de financiación de las y yo creo
I believe that there needs to be a reform adopted constitutionally to allow that all the campaigns are done fairly, that the state could control more of the campaigns, like publicly funded, so that way that they can control the media, how much money is spent, and the normal costs of campaigning. That would seem excessive, but it's not in front of the costs of the multinational money that from multinational companies, from the mafia, from great business powers, continues electing Congress people, continues electing presidents, and we have to end that. We have to end that. Here we have too big a problem with corrupt financing, and all the financing should be, in my opinion, in the power of the state, so you could easily detect any kind of extra costs that shouldn't be by the state.
New translators. Thank you very much for having us here. I really do appreciate it, and I share your passion for elections. And I probably have a million questions, but I'm just going to stick to one to make it simple.
Muchas gracias por estar aquí, y yo tengo como millones de preguntas, pero vamos a empezar con una.
I want to talk a little bit about the transmission and the software where we're having some discrepancies.
Quiero hablar un poquito de la transmisión y del software donde estamos teniendo irregularidades.
One of the guest speakers at our delegation said the issue last time was the transmission from the mesas to the tabulation room, in which you kind of mentioned earlier.
Uno de nuestros delegados dijo que en las elecciones pasadas de marzo el problema fue en la transmisión de los datos de la mesa hacia la computación.
I've also heard that they expect to have those same discrepancies this time again.
He escuchado que también tienen, tal vez ocurran esas irregularidades esta vez.
My question is this.
Mi pregunta es esta.
What company runs the software that does that transmission?
¿Qué compañía está a cargo del software que corre esa transmisión?
And is there a number, percentage-wise, in which where the mesas don't match with the transmission would trigger an automatic audit or recount to make sure that the numbers are straight?
Y si hay un número o porcentaje que si no coinciden los resultados con la mesa, con lo que ha sido transmitido, que en el proceso del escrutinio enforce que haya ¿cómo se dice? An audit, right?
Audit.
Como un proceso editorial que chequeen el proceso, que puedan revisar qué hay. Si hay un porcentaje que diga, ok, este porcentaje está muy alto, entonces vamos a tener que hacer un auditorio de todo lo que ha pasado.
Bueno, mire, rápidamente. El software de transmisión de los datos,
the software of the data transmission was contracted via this business called Indra. It's a Spanish business. The software which we consolidate all the results at a national and international level, was given to the National Electoral Council to consolidate these results and announce the winner of the election. That narrative of fraud from the Spanish company Indra has been put out there a lot. I've focused and been talking with an engineer that I've contracted for the space. At the very least, that the software from the Indra that are already frozen since last Thursday are not manipulated. They could try it, but it would cost very much. I don't think a multinational company that has hundreds of thousands of business all over the world would risk to lose in these circumstances their entire credibility. Because on top of the pre-count, we also have the process of scrutiny. So that's why I've asked every single party so that they registrate their witnesses. Yesterday, the campaign from the Pacto Histórico has already told me that they've already registered more than 70,000 witnesses. The Federico Gutierrez has registered more than 50,000. They could register more, 20,000 more. And the electoral witnesses can take pictures in real time. As soon as this comes out of the tables, and they're going to publish them. And to dare to do a fraud in these circumstances, I just don't believe it. But that's why I tell you that these elections will be the most transparent in the history of this country. Believe me that it's going to be the most transparent. It's going to be that way.
Gracias.
If there are no more questions, I just will say goodbye, saying thank you very much for coming here and being here in this fantastic country where fantasy and reality come together. There's millions of people in this country that are willing to surpass so many years of just sadness, death, hurt, war, corruption. Millions and millions of people that keep adding to say, enough. This will no longer happen. Thank you very much.